Is it a bird? Is it a plane? No. It's everyone's favourite CEO, James Gunn, here to breathe new life and colour into the DC Cinematic Extended Universe, or whatever they're calling it these days. Seriously though, hey everyone, hope you're doing well. This morning I watched Superman, one of the most hotly anticipated movies of the year, and you know what? Personally, I thought it was pretty good. Now, admittedly, the vibrations going into this film were all over the place. I think it's fair to say that for a while now, the character of Superman has had a bit of a PR problem. Ask most people under 30 what they think of the Man of Steel, and they'll probably tell you that he's a kind of boring, one-note superhero, especially when compared to the tortured psychology of Batman, or the snarky, self-aware charisma of Iron Man. But of course, this image of Superman as an uncomplicated Boy Scout is mostly just a contemporary misunderstanding of the character, fueled partly by our modern obsession with brooding anti-heroes and partly by the way he's been portrayed on the big screen over the last couple of decades. Because look, whether or not you like Zack Snyder's or even Bryan Singer's take on the character, I think it's safe to say that neither exactly made him feel particularly warm or relatable. Superman is of course an alien from a different galaxy altogether, but part of what makes him so compelling is his humanity, the fact that he was raised in Kansas by two loving parents, with a deep moral code and a quiet sense of duty. And in my opinion, that's something the live-action Superman movies haven't really portrayed properly for quite a while. Which is a shame because, let's be real, it's the films which shape most people's modern understanding of these iconic comic book characters. And this is why when James Gunn was announced, not just as the new creative head of the DC Cinematic Universe's soft reboot, but also the writer and director of a new Superman film which would spearhead said new chapter, a lot of people, myself included, were excited. Because here is a guy who is genuinely passionate and knowledgeable about comic books, and who knows how to make movies that actually feel like the pages of one. He embraces the weirdness of the medium rather than shying away from it like so many directors do. And he's even somehow able to take all that passion and weirdness and colour and get it past the dreaded corporate studio filter which so often stops comic book movies and directors from reaching their true potential. We of course saw this with the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy, which is for my money the best set of films the MCU has to offer, and that soft reboot of the Suicide Squad he did a few years ago, which was also pretty enjoyable and which I imagine got him this gig. Now don't get me wrong, James Gunn is not perfect. For example, the guy's sense of humour can be a tiny bit hit and miss, but overall I had quite a lot of hope for this new rendition of Superman, especially after I saw the trailer, which concerned me a tiny bit, mainly due to the sheer amount of CGI and the number of characters and plot threads it seemed to be juggling, but overall which looked very promising. And then, last but not least, and I promise this is the end of the classic Cozy Kino Show preamble, I came across a few pretty negative reviews right before stepping into the cinema, one of which even called it the death of the superhero movie, which helped level out my expectations to more of a neutral stance, which honestly I think is the best place to be when going into a film. But what did I actually think about the Superman movie itself? Well, first of all, I think this film does a good job at making the Man of Steel feel fun again. You know, showing Clark Kent's more human side. It was very refreshing to see a Superman who not only has an actual personality, but also is not completely indestructible. He gets hurt, physically and emotionally, and the film does not shy away from that. But it also leans heavily into his warmth and decency and humanity, and that was all very nice to see. I thought David Corenswet gave a rock-solid performance, his chemistry with Rachel Brosnahan was electric, and overall I thought he really suited the tone James Gunn was going for. And yes, that man has once again crafted a movie which feels like the pages of a comic book. I've seen lots of people compare this to Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, and honestly, I get it. It really has that live-action Saturday morning cartoon vibe, which some people who like their superheroes on the gritty side probably won't like, but which I certainly did. I also loved how lived-in and normalized this universe felt. We are not watching a world come to terms with the fact that there are monsters and aliens and all that. James Gunn instead goes down the MCU Spider-Man route of basically saying, look guys, you already know the origin story, so let's not waste time retreading old ground. And I think this was a really smart smart decision overall. The way everyone in the film reacts to meta-human chaos with this sort of casual acceptance gives the whole thing a slightly absurd but also surprisingly grounded feel. Now, sure, that approach does have its drawbacks. For example, I don't think the scenes in Kansas with Clark's parents hit as hard as the film clearly wants them to, but honestly, there's just this quietly surreal feeling running through the whole film, like it's fully aware not just of superhero fatigue, but of the audience's existing familiarity with Superman as a character. It knows we've seen this story before, it knows we know who Clark Kent is, and instead of treating that like a problem, it just leans into it. The film is less interested in trying to reintroduce us to the idea of Superman, and is more just about letting us hang out with him for a few hours in a slightly weirder, slightly more colourful world. Now, that might not work for everyone, especially people watching this movie in 100 years' time who know absolutely nothing about the character, but for what this film needed to be, I think it worked. And here's the thing, watching the trailers for Superman, I got a bit worried that it was going to be so distracted with restarting this universe and introducing all these different characters and plot lines, that the film itself would feel distracted and bloated. But you know what? I think it just about gets away with it. First of all, because the movie is paced incredibly well, at least in my opinion. It passed the classic "did I ever check my watch or wonder when the film was going to end" test with flying colours. But second of all, I just thought that all the different plates the movie was spinning were also interesting in their own ways and got the right amount of screen time. Like, whatever you want to say about James Gunn, the guy is very good at making us connect to the lesser known characters of his films. The Justice Gang in particular was a pleasant surprise, and while some people will claim their inclusion is the movie just trying to set up sequels, and I'm sure that's partially the case, I actually didn't mind at all, as not only are they all likeable, but they're integrated well enough into the story that they actually don't detract from it at all. They just make it better. And look, while I don't think Superman should have been any longer than its 130-minute runtime, it did leave me wanting more of basically everyone and everything the film introduced, whether that's the titular character, or Lois, or Krypto, or the Justice Gang, or Nicholas Hoult's Lex Luthor, who, as everyone has already commented on, has generational levels of hate in this movie. So I guess in that regard, yeah, they got me. I'm intrigued to see where this universe goes next. Hopefully we get a lot more of Nathan Fillion and his funny haircut. And as for the more technical aspects of Superman, I thought they were great across the board. The editing was really strong. One cut in particular made me laugh out loud. If you've seen the movie, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I also thought the movie looked pretty good. Now, I've seen some people say it looks terrible, and I just can't get by this opinion. I don't really understand what people are even talking about. I mean, look, there are a few scenes in this alternate dimension or whatever, which of course lean very heavy into the CGI, and yeah, it looks a bit drab, but I don't know, man, it wasn't that big of a deal to me. Maybe it's just because I personally really like that cartoon feel and what James Gunn is able to do with the camera, but anyway. At the end of the day with Superman, I think if you're expecting this film to reinvent the superhero blockbuster wheel, like The Dark Knight or Into the Spider-Verse did, you'll be slightly disappointed. This is not exactly a subtle movie, and it's not doing 50 different things you've never seen before, but I thought it was a very consistent film. Other than the action, which I thought was just a tiny bit hit and miss, the movie is pretty solid across the board. Like the music, for example, brilliant. John Murphy's score has that kind of modern blockbuster sweep to it, but it also weaves in little fragments of that classic John Williams theme in a way that stirred my soul very nicely. And unlike a lot of Gunn's other work, the needle drops are used sparingly, which I reckon was a smart call for this type of movie. So look, I understand if a certain portion of audiences were just the tiniest bit underwhelmed by James Gunn's Superman. I mean, some people really didn't like it actually, but personally, I cannot relate. I thought it struck a really solid balance between playing things safe and taking some genuine creative swings. And while it is not the best film I have seen this year, and it is not the greatest superhero movie of all time, which I think some people wanted it to be, it is an enjoyable 130 minutes, and I am excited to see where this universe goes next. But that's going to be it for now. Please... No, wait, hang on, there's one more thing I forgot to say. I saw this review saying that this film really suffers with the whole sincerity thing of bathos and cutting off serious moments with jokes, and as the guy who made that sincerity video, I thought I should just say that I don't really agree at all. But yeah, anyway, that's gonna be it. Please let me know what you thought of Superman in the comments section. I'm intrigued because people just have such differing opinions on this film, which is just very fascinating to me. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.